Hello, I am so glad you guys can join us tonight. I'm Alecia Lawyer. I'm the founder of ROCO Chamber Orchestra here in Houston. We have a great concert coming up a week from this Saturday at St. John the Divine, an Episcopal church in Houston. It's going to be at 5 o'clock Central, and you can live stream us for free anywhere all over the world, and especially if you're in Antarctica, because we've not been live streamed there, and I think it's important that we get all 7 continents. So 5 o'clock Central, or afterward, you can still see it on Facebook and YouTube. Just search for ROCO Houston. We also have music available afterward on all the streaming apps and on our website at the listening room. You can also hear all of our past concerts. So I'm thrilled tonight to talk about one of the particular pieces that we'll be premiering. We have actually 3 world premieres on that concert. And later in the broadcast, I'll be talking more specifically about these other pieces. But the one we're going to feature tonight is a really impactful work called Earth, and it is by Aaron Jay Kernis, a composer that I got to meet early in the 2000s, and then Nicholas Phan, who is a fabulous tenor. We'll start our conversation with Nicholas, and we'll discuss this piece and just how much this work hopefully can impact our community and our whole region and our whole world in classical music. So Nicholas, would you like to come on and we can have a discussion about this piece?
Yes.
Here. Thanks for joining us. Hey.
Hi. There we are.
There we are. Welcome. So glad you can be here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So ROCO is all about relationships. It's about forming relationships through the language of music. And I know that you're a fan of that, and that's a big part of what you do in your life. And we both know Aaron from various ways. I heard his, I think it's called Concerto of Echoes that he did that was kind of a going on about the Brandenburg concertos that Bach wrote. And then we've played his Too Hot Toccata that you guys can hear in our listening room, which is a very complicated piece. His pieces are really difficult as far as technically difficult. And I'm just going to say this, and he's not here, so I can in some ways say this. Some composers write difficult music and you don't really hear it. You're just kind of in a big jumble. But it seems to me that every line that's very difficult and notey that he writes is impactful and purposeful. And so it's worth the woodshedding that we've all been doing to get this not just accurate, but be able to express it. So I can only imagine, because as an oboist, this piece starts out with you and me, baby. This piece starts out. I can only imagine how difficult his writing could be for voice. So I would love for you, number one, to say, how did you meet Aaron and get to know him, and then we can move on to the technical parts of the piece.
Sure. So I met Aaron like 2013, maybe. Time flies, and time feels like a construct in these days.
But I always.
We met. I think it was around 2013. I was at Chamber Music Northwest, and they were doing a performance of a clarinet quintet, I think, of his, and we met there. And I think we obviously both knew of each other, and we're happy to connect there. And then a few years passed, and then I saw him again at the Cabrillo Festival out here in the Bay Area, down in Santa Cruz, which is totally devoted to new music.
Yeah.
And they performed, I think it was his 2nd symphony or something. And I was just there because they had a new music director who was a friend of mine, and I just went down to go see the concerts because I was home and able to drive down. And we connected after that concert, and he was like, I'm really dying to write something for you.
Aww.
And I know, I was like, wow, that's cool. And so this piece really is that dream and that conversation come to fruition. I mean, it's been years in the making, and I don't know, it's amazing that it's come to life this way.
So in talking about the actual vocal lines that he wrote for you, and him knowing your voice so well, I know you say it feels like it sits in your voice well, but it is very technically challenging. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced in this new work that he's written for you?
The challenge really lies in his counterpoint, right? I mean, it's all these intricate things that are happening at once. And then as a singer, we don't have buttons to press.
Exactly.
Or, we don't put our finger down on the fingerboard. So we have to have a very kind of different relationship with pitch and where they come. And so kind of trying to figure that all out, you have to really kind of dissect what he's written in a way so that you can digest it. In a piece like this, I really kind of feel a little bit like the singer has to think a little bit like a conductor. You have to have a complete picture in your mind of what's happening before you can really have a handle on, your own part. And so the process of it has been really intense. And, he was so good. I mean, he got scores to us with tons of time. So that was amazing. So there was plenty of time, but I didn't really start like having an intensive study on it until like right around the holidays and beginning of the new year. And I was telling this story up in Seattle the other day, but right around that time it got intense. I actually had to have a knee surgery. And so, coming out of it with anesthesia and like, pain meds, my brain was so foggy. And there were just these days where I would be sitting at my keyboard, like totally overwhelmed by everything that was going on. As I was trying to kind of, find a clear picture in my brain, I also had to like sort through this brain fog. So that was sort of an unnecessary challenge. But, Aaron is so clear with what he writes. And so the vision kind of jumps off the page at you once you discern all the complexity and kind of make sense of it. And it's, I actually just said to him the other day, it's amazing to me how well the piece fits. We didn't really have to talk about it very much, but in terms of like range and kind of where notes lie in the voice and what is possible in those places, like he really had an amazing grasp on that. And I think that's really impressive. So I'm grateful because it makes my process so much easier.
Right, exactly. Well, I know that he is here, and I feel like a game show host. And now we shall bring out
I
Aaron.
just arrived and talk about fuzzy. My picture is very fuzzy over here,
Okay.
whereas Nick's is very clear. And it's really nice to be here. And thank you for those lovely words. I'm really, I'm first of all, I'm just really happy that the piece fits you, Nick, because it's for you. And, I did a little bit of studying and listening to your, recordings and that kind of thing and thinking about tessitura and all those things before I started. But then I put that in the back of my mind and just wrote what I felt was right for the piece.
Well,
It worked out perfectly.
I know. And I'm so glad you can be here with us, Aaron. And I'm really looking forward to having you down here. I have a fun story about ROCO in our early years. I sound like we've been around for a while, and we have 17 seasons. But in our early years, when Mayanne came to us the very first time, Mayanne Chen, our artistic partner, we were doing Mozart 40 and your Too Hot Toccata, right? And a lot of people have difficulty with your music, right? You write really difficult works. And so she made a lot of rehearsal time for your work, and the Mozart 40, obviously not. Well, usually, obviously not. So we do the Too Hot Toccata, we read it down. And she was a little stunned, and I'm just going to flex like that and say, we can do that because all my musicians play new music all the time. Yeah. And none of us in the entire orchestra had ever played Mozart 40 in performance. That's the kind of vibe we have in the orchestra. And so that's what's exciting, is digging in not only to the classics, but really kind of starting at a different level with the new work. So that's why I'm excited next week, because I know with Sarah Hicks, we're going to just, jump right in and be able to get to the meat and the depth of what you've written here. So we started this whole broadcast saying it's all about relationships. And I met you in 2009, I think, when your concerto with Echoes premiered. Isn't that right around that time? And just started to follow what you did and what your works were. And what I love about what you write is you have overarching, in-depth themes of your, love and nature. And it's right on your website, right? The things that you have themes about that are passionate, that you feel passionate about. And so I love the fact that this one, I didn't come to you and say, write a piece about Earth. Y'all came to us knowing what we do. And so it's so organic. Could you just briefly start on what led you to writing this particular work and why this topic, and a little bit about Kai?
Yeah. So Kai Hoffman-Krull is the poet for the first movement of the work, which is the largest movement in the piece. And we had done a piece together. I'd commissioned him to write a text relating to actually to gun massacres. And you wouldn't think that this was a piece for the San Francisco Girls Chorus. And basically what happened is, after the San Bernardino shootings and the fact that they were perpetrated by two parents who left their baby girl in the hands of their grandmother and then went and shot up a facility was so shocking to me, and millions of others, that I felt I had to say something about that. And writing from the perspective of young women, anyway, I shouldn't go on about this piece.
Oh, right. No, yeah, but
you know,
yeah.
But anyway, we had a wonderful collaboration. Very sensitive poet. I had come to know him through my student, Michael Gilbertson, who'd done a lot. We've done a lot of work together, and I've been very interested. I mean, in the past, I was setting a lot of texts, a lot of existing texts, and over time, I became more and more interested in collaborating with living artists and having there be dialogue rather than just taking on a completely fully formed pre-existing text. And so my work with the poet Peter Cole and with Kai are the two main things that have come that have created works during this time. I've really loved the process and want to keep going with that. So anyway, as you know, it just, existing in the world, I just going back to those, what people know of Beethoven's life and the walks that he would take in the woods for inspiration. Nature is a big part of the lives of artists, and we think about what is around us all the time, and draw, and draw something that sustains us from it. So as the situation, on the earth has been developing, it's been, increasingly in my attention as, with so many others. So, and given that I learned that Kai had begun this new life as a farmer in the Pacific Northwest, in the San Juan Islands, and was both farming himself and being a researcher on issues of sustainability. It just was such a natural fit, and he brings such both a love of the land and incredible authenticity to the experience of living on the land, that the text feels incredibly just authentic and true to what it's trying to say. At the same time, because he was working on the text, I wanted to find an existing text that similarly reflected a love of nature, and what better person than Wordsworth to look towards in that. So it's a and then there's the third part, which I think is important, that I've loved the Mahler's essentially last work, Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, for since I was a kid, especially the last movement, the farewell, der Abschied, and that movement seems to show some. I mean, I think Mahler was aware of so many death-related pieces in his oeuvre, but that particular movement seems to reflect a kind of peaceful farewell to either earthly living or to even just public life, that I wanted to find a text that reflected a love of nature, and for me was a kind of, I hate to say this, a farewell to the earth. And hopefully it's not going to go there, but hopefully we'll, but that's where it was coming from.
Well, I love that one of the statements that is on your website as well, is you write music that is meaningful to other people's lives. That rings so true to me and ROCO, and the reason I started ROCO, to have music woven through our community, that it is a language that every person can relate to. And I think that's what's so beautiful, because yes, you have the text, and you loving to work with living poets is why I and ROCO like to work with living composers, because you really have that dialogue that does influence. I mean, the fact that I could get the first page of the oboe part, a couple months ago, for you to be like, look out, here it comes. is just a really, I mean, that would have been so fascinating to be able to have had that dialogue with other composers. But to bring Nicholas back into the conversation, meaningful to other people's lives. I mean, that is what this obviously is and will be next week. For, I know you guys have already premiered the chamber version, and that definitely informs what we'll be doing next week. How would you say, both of you, maybe start with Nicholas, the differences between the chamber, and obviously there's more instruments, between the chamber work and the chamber orchestra work? What are some of the differences, and how do you expect the piece to morph and change a little bit from the premiere of the chamber?
Oh, why am I starting?
Aaron talked a little bit.
No, it's fine. I mean, from my perspective, I think what's I'm looking forward to is I actually feel like the added instruments and the more sort of like full orchestral color and texture is actually going to make things perhaps even a little bit clearer, which sounds a little counterintuitive because sometimes you think, oh, fewer instruments clearer, but actually in a way, I think there's this weird thing where with orchestras, you can actually play softer than a chamber group because you have so many people, particularly in the strings. And I just think that those kinds of textures and colors are going to kind of increase clarity and sort of, I don't know, put things in a sort of hyper saturated, in a good way, harmonic sense. And so I'm really looking forward to experiencing that.
Aaron, what do you think what do you feel is the difference, and what do you intended the difference to be?
Well, there are a couple of things, of course, and I hopefully what Nicholas said is exactly the case. I hope that there'll be greater support actually for the voice for you because of that body of strings and the body of the fact that the harmony will be clear, because so much of the harmony in the chamber version lives in the piano part, and the piano, of course, after you attack a chord, it dies away, whereas in the strings it doesn't. And I think that's going to give a kind of, I think that's going to both give a clarity and a sense of, thinking of another word than support, but a sense that the vocal lines can live more freely actually within this harmonic realm that will be clearer. And the second thing is that in front of the harmony, I took many of the solo lines in the chamber version and kept them in the chamber orchestra in that version. So there are very prominent parts for the solo oboe, for the solo violin, cello, viola, horn, and flute. And this is also something I'm very curious about, because actually the technically trickiest music is in those solo instruments. And
Yeah.
a lot of what the rest of the players have to play is actually not very difficult
At all. Yes, well, I will show you. I see that we've lost Aaron for a minute.
So it's in a way almost like a kind of concertante group that keeps on poking out of the larger texture,
right.
to give a very personal side, which the chamber version has.
I think we've lost your video a little bit. Well, you can look. This is the
We're a
oboe.
little stuck now.
This is the oboe line. This is the opening solo of the oboe line. Like, yeah, there's nobody else. There's no one else there. It's just me. So, and yes, it does in a way. It makes you take it very, not just seriously, but saying, okay, because the words that come before that, which I think Nicholas talked about too, that keeps repeating in the poetry. And here's the poetry. It's really fun. A musical score has the poetry that it's written about, and a conductor, what's really fun to see, and I love to show people, this is what the conductor sees. They see all the different instruments at once and who's playing what. And there's Nicholas. And it's backward, I know. But he says, why are seasons no longer the seasons of before? And it's a return. It's original. It's continually returning of asking that question. Nicholas, this, as you've said before, is a story first and then a song. And the story is an in-depth personal, and I've read what you've written about this, that you can go microscopic and then you can go macroscopic, if that's a word. But the fact that you have the depth of the ground and the earth, and then coming back up into the stars, it's just fascinating to me. The text that he wrote tell me a little bit about kind of returning to that theme and how it makes you feel going through this 30-minute piece. 20 minutes of it is this poem.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a constant question, which kind of feels a lot like, I mean, the way we experience climate change now. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard actually, like, why does the weather feel so different? You know,
Right.
I mean, even out here, and I live in San Francisco, and, you know, things are very different, and weather patterns are different. Things like catch fire at the wrong time of year. The fires, when they do catch fire, get out of control. You know, there's something about Kai's text that it felt, there's an earnestness to it, and a sort of like, I don't know, it feels very real in a sense, because he paints these sort of micro experiences that touch on that macro question constantly. And I don't know, there's something that just feels very honest about it. It doesn't feel, because it's not overblown, it feels actually much more powerful, because these are things that we all can sort of relate to. And you also have this perspective that the speaker is definitely someone who has, I mean, their hands on the earth on a daily basis. And so their relationship to it is really visceral and really direct. And so I don't know, I find that really powerful.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what's really interesting, so for commissions, what orchestral musicians see 99% of the time is the music you play, just the oboe part, right? You just see that. You kind of don't even know how it fits in and out of things. And I know it was not possible to do because there's so many words in this particular piece, but I know my orchestra really digs into the score, tries to figure out what's being said when we're performing the solos we have, so that there really is an intricate laying of that. We have so many premieres that we've done that it's really important. But I tell you, and I've talked to you about this too, Aaron, that a lot of orchestral musicians just literally just get their part, and it doesn't lay in as deeply as what you would do. I imagined it as if you're doing a theater piece and you're an actor. You wouldn't just learn your lines. You would understand how you're responding to someone else's. And while we might do that in an instrumental way, to have a singer, we also really try to do that, and then also layer that on top of your own ideas. And I think that's what's missing sometimes, is that dialogue, which is why it's so impactful to have a living composer come, be at rehearsals, and have actual dialogue with the musicians that are performing the piece. So we're excited to dig into that. I'm glad you're back. Thank you for coming back and in this world of COVID and weirdness. But so the next thing we'll be talking about is the farewell. I know you talked about that it is the reflection of Das Lied von der Erde and what you were writing about. Can you also talk a tiny bit about how do you compose to reflect the differences between the movements? What do you make choices of in instruments that you use, in tempos, in textures and timbres? Just a little bit about maybe 2 or 3 things that are different between the 2 movements technically.
Yeah. So I actually wrote the second movement first, because the text, Kai's text, was being worked on, and I had the, you know, I had the Wordsworth, and the Wordsworth the text is part of a very much larger text, and so it's an excerpt, and that I was initially uncomfortable with the idea that I was kind of messing with his words, but you know, he's long gone, so I can do that with impunity.
Tintern from Tintern.
It took quite a while to get it to feel like I had the right sequence of, I mean, they're in basically the same order, but the right number of lines and that wound up in the right place. But what I knew from the very beginning of the farewell was that the flute was going to be, in a sense, an alter ego for the voice. And I had the image from the very beginning of the flute as kind of the wanderer, as the one that was wandering the earth and experiencing the nature, and that was mirroring the tenor part. But I also had this sense to start from a very resolved place, from a very tonal, rich, both intimate and very lush kind of opening, even though it's incredibly quiet. And of course, I didn't have Kai's text. But as I saw it developed, it was very clear structurally they couldn't be more different. Kai's text is a series of small episodes and tell a dramatic story, whereas Wordsworth text is a rumination about nature and a series of thoughts about his experience in the world. So the tone, the harmonic tone of this lushness and this richness, also much more, how can I say it? It's more unified. It's more one thing from beginning to end. Whereas the Kai's text has many different smaller sections of a lot of word painting in the first movement. So that alone, I knew I wanted to begin from a very rich, resolved place at the beginning of Farewell, and then knew that it had to end in a place that went far away from being resolved,
right,
and was open-ended, and that was the most difficult thing to write. I rewrote the flute solo, I don't know, 10 times before I felt like I got close to what I was trying to do.
That's great to hear. Well, the other question is, you're so prolific. You've had so many pieces written. Do you still get a butterfly flutter right before the first time you hear your piece that is being performed?
Well, I will tell you, the nice thing about conducting is that the terror isn't about the piece. The terror is about just going up there and doing it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to just leave those particular butterflies, in the back and forget about them. But typically, pretty much whoever is closest to me, I'll be squeezing their hand until it, they feel something, gotta stop, this is really hurting. Yeah, every premiere is always a fresh and terrifying experience. Yes.
Right. That's going to be good. Well, okay. So Nicholas, coming back on I was going to ask you just a tiny bit about, I know you're a founder as well. I'm a founder of ROCO, but you're the founder of the Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago. And I know that came from a place of wanting the intimacy and the joy of connecting so deeply with people so close to you. So can you tell me just a little bit about that and what goes on there with the art song and vocal chamber music?
Sure. We founded in 2010, which feels like just yesterday. That's crazy. It's funny, you were saying a second ago, like, I'm talking like we've been around forever, and it turns out you have. And that's kind of the feeling. It's a fresh feeling, but it's a feeling that we have now too at CAIC. We founded it because my two co-founders, who are both pianists, Shannon McGinnis and Nicholas Hutchinson. Nick is the other Nick is on faculty at DePaul, and Shannon's on faculty at Roosevelt, and they were based in Chicago. And the three of us actually met each other as students at the University of Michigan, where we all studied with Martin Katz, the pianist, who is this amazing, a mentor of the art song art form. And we were all really passionate about vocal recitals, and we were kind of seeing, just in general as a trend, there were fewer and fewer opportunities to be able to do those. So we thought, well, and particularly in Chicago, the market had like really dried up. There was maybe one institution that would do one once every other year. And so we kind of thought, okay, well, let's start something and see what happens. And we realized pretty quickly that we needed to kind of, a lot of that music was written for people's living rooms. A lot of these art songs, like Schubert Lieder and Schumann Lieder, et cetera, they were, written for times when people didn't have, iPods or laptops to play their music on, or a record player. If you wanted music in the home, you had to play it for yourself. And it was actually a way of composers kind of getting their name out there too, because they couldn't make a disc of their music. You had to and not everybody could make it to the concert hall. So it was kind of like free advertising in that way too. All those kind of crass reasons aside, it's a really incredible art form where people would really push the boundaries of experimentation. And you're able to kind of get away with that because you're in someone's living room in an intimate space. And there's something about vocal music where when you're not doing an opera and you're just doing concert pieces or recital, like, you know, vocal chamber music and song, you're really bearing your soul. There's no, you know, set costume pieces, no wigs, no makeup. There's not other people on stage aside from the instrumentalists who are with you normally. And so kind of putting that in an intimate setting really kind of helps bring it to life. And it's been kind of extraordinary what we've seen there. We've grown from an audience of like nobody to, you know, we fill our halls now, at least up until the pandemic we did. And we've done amazing things. We've had amazing artists come through. We've been able to kind of plow through incredible swaths of repertoire with these amazing artists who I'm so grateful to for coming through to learn it and perform it. And something that's been really cool about it is that, you know, I think what I appreciate about what you're doing at ROCO is that you're just kind of like throwing this idea of standard repertoire out the window, and you're just kind of like, let's just do music and experience it. And you're like, you've got, I mean, how many premieres on this concert? Like,
we have 3 world premieres that I'll be speaking about soon.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's incredible. And we've had a kind of luxury of not having that pressure of a canon, so to speak. I mean, I think maybe all of us who are steeped in classical music think, oh, Schubert, Schumann, they wrote songs, we know about it, but most audiences don't. And so even like really erudite chamber music audiences and classical music audiences don't even realize that Schubert wrote 700 or, you know, 800 songs.
Right.
Which is kind of nuts. And so it's been kind of a liberating experience because it's really forced us to look at all music with very fresh eyes and kind of, you know, it's empowered us to take risks in terms of programming. And so, you know, it's great. And it's the skills that we've built there, I've built there, and I think my colleagues have built there really serve us well in a situation like this, where you're encountering, again, new music and it's very fresh, and, you know, you have the skill set to kind of jump in there and discern your 2 scripts, like the words and the notes.
Well, I mean, for us, we started, you know, doing a lot of commissioning. We've actually done, by this concert, 124 world premieres.
Wow.
And I think we're closing on the second largest commissioning organization in the US, but it's really just about finding, like you said, that dialogue and the zeitgeist of the time and the music of the time. But we kind of stumbled on accidental, really great things. And one of them was, I could never decide what order I wanted the concert to be in until the last minute. So I was like, why put an order? So we put our program in alphabetical order. So no one knows what's coming until you tell them. And then it feels more like a jazz concert. And that's the feeling. You don't have the expectation. And then when that article appeared a few years ago about that fact that Mozart, people don't even know Mozart now, instead of me bemoaning this, I was like, yes, you know, that means everything's on the table, Mozart included. And now so coming up on our program, and by the way, we're going to be opening, for those of you on this stream, we'll give you a little surprise. You will know this piece is first on the program, believe it or not, just to turn things a little bit upside down, because it's dense, it's got so much to absorb, and there's just a lot of layers to this that we want to prepare everyone for, and that's going to be exciting. But we also have a piece, Pictures at an Exhibition, which is a standard rep piece, but it was written by Alan Guth from England based on the Mussorgsky's piano version. So he didn't even listen to the Ravel. He ignored the Ravel. And I only really understood this when I got my part and said, where's my oboe solo? And kind of rude of me, but I did. And so he explained that he completely wrote it different tonally. So Aaron, I think you're going to be really delighted by his completely new take on the piece. And then we've paired I selected art from the Museum of Fine Arts for each movement, for each piece, so that it's really tied to Houston and kind of backward from what it really was. And then the other world premiere, one of the other ones, is by Liana Premiani, who is a Toulmin Prize winner. She's writing a piece that is based on human trafficking and celebrating 5 women from the New Abolitionist Project who have thrived after being sex trafficked. And there's a very short 8-minute piece that's going to be just this thrilling celebration and of these women's lives, and kind of juxtaposing our value of art and humanity and climate. And so we're not a social justice orchestra, but this is what people are writing about and what we care about. And the questions I keep getting from reporters are, you know, well, isn't this just kind of a new thing that's going on? I said, no, I mean, this has happened since the dawn of time, that composers right in reaction to what's happening. So I am thrilled that we can do these kind of pieces. And then I can't forget Jonathan Leshnoff's work, which is this fun romp called Score, that'll just be this, rousing piece. But the variety and the depth and the layering of all this, I'm thrilled to be including this work and premiering this orchestral version. So I really thank you guys for joining us. It's next Saturday at 5 p.m. You can find us at ROCO Houston on YouTube and Facebook, searching at 5 p.m. Central, but you can also find it afterward. It'll still be up for listening, and it'll be eventually in our listening room for free listening after Aaron and Nicholas and I say, yes, it can stay, because it will be magnificent. So thank you guys so very much. I cannot wait to see you in person.
Thank you, Alecia. It sounds like a really wonderful, thrilling concert. So
exciting. Thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we'll see you in a week.
See you very soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.